Hi everyone, it's Maddie. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe and check out all my previous videos before. For those of you who don't know, I live with type 1 diabetes. I've been living with type 1 diabetes for approximately a little over 3 months now. And today is day number 7, November 7th, 2018 of Diabetes Awareness Month video that I'm going to be doing for you today. And today's question is kind of one that a lot of people don't really know how to explain or talk about, so I figured I'd kind of talk about it because a lot of us have probably gone through this but don't really realize the full extent of it. And I hope to do a very, very in-depth video about my personal experience with this whole type of thing because it's still fresh in my mind. I just ended this type of phase with diabetes, and when I was going through this phase, I wish there was more videos that kind of helped explain what to expect when you're in it and what it's like to get out of this phase in terms of diabetes. Before I confuse the heck out of you, I'm just going to read the question and I'm going to put a name to this phase. So question 7, what is the honeymoon phase? Describe your personal experience with it if applicable. I'll briefly give you my personal experience, but I want to do a very in-depth personal experience with it just because I want to give those of you who are newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes or may have had diabetes for a while but you never went through a honeymoon, or you don't really recall your honeymoon and you kind of want to refresh yourself on what it's about, just so you know what to expect and what I went through. And those of you, again, who are newly diagnosed, you probably will go through this at some point. So first of all, what is the honeymoon phase? To sum up, the honeymoon phase is a part of right after you're diagnosed with diabetes. Typically you go through this stage where your pancreas still, the cells in your pancreas that still secrete insulin are still working. So like I had said in previous videos, about 80 to 90% of the beta cells in the pancreas with a type 1 diabetic are destroyed at diagnosis typically. Not always. But right after you're diagnosed, you begin taking synthetic insulin, correct? So you're taking doses and doses and doses. Well, what happens is your pancreas kind of wakes up a little bit because the high blood sugars that you had before at diagnosis were toxic to your beta cells in your pancreas. So now that you're taking this synthetic insulin, your pancreas, whatever 10%, let's just say 10% of your beta cells that are still functioning and haven't been destroyed by your immune system's antibodies yet, are still secreting insulin. So what happens is they kind of wake up. So what'll happen is you'll experience a lot of low blood sugars and a lot of things where like your blood sugars are really out of whack and your insulin doses are usually minimal. Typically the honeymoon phase begins shortly after diagnosis. For me personally, it started about a week after I was diagnosed, and my honeymoon phase lasted approximately a month and a half to 2 months. Some people can have longer honeymoon phases depending on how old they were. A standard rule, again, not a hard and fast rule, but the older you are, especially people who are diagnosed with latent autoimmune disease of adults, say you're over 30 when you're diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, typically your honeymoon phase can last a couple of years before you really have to go on higher doses of insulin. So what to kind of expect? Well, first of all, your pancreas is working for you, so I guess you can kind of count your blessings that it's working a little bit. But unfortunately, you kind of feel like you're out of control because you kind of like, well, gosh, pancreas, why don't you either work all the way or don't work at all? You're kind of sitting in this limbo state. So it can get kind of frustrating at times. I mean, I went through it, been there, done that. Again, when I explain my personal experience more in depth, I want to kind of explain how I've kind of felt about the honeymoon phase and like transitioning in and out of it. But that being said, the honeymoon phase is temporary. So even if you've been in a honeymoon phase for, some people can have really extreme honeymoon phases where they go years and years, it's going to eventually come to an end. It'll get to the point where probably most if not all of your beta cells will be completely destroyed and you will be fully dependent on synthetic insulin to manage blood sugar. So the honeymoon phase is kind of a state where your pancreas can still aid in blood sugar control with minimal external insulin from a pen or a syringe or vial or however you distribute your insulin to yourself. So, I mean, again, everybody's honeymoon's different, but for me, mine lasted 2 months. Some people really don't go through one, but I would say, from what I had read, about 60% of all type 1 diabetics at when they're first diagnosed do go through a honeymoon phase. Again, some longer than others. Mine was about 2 months. I think my endocrinologist said to me when she first recognized, like, yeah, you're honeymooning. You've been honeymooning probably since, about a week after you were diagnosed. I think she had told me, like, mine would probably last 6 months. But they don't know that. They're taking a guess. Well, she obviously didn't guess anywhere near that. It was about a third of that period. 2 months is 1/3 of 6. So she guessed about, she got about a third of it right, but it didn't last a full 6 months. But anyways, is there any way that you can extend the honeymoon? Well, there's tons of research on that. Quite frankly, I can't 100% say that there is a certain way you can do it, but they do claim that some research have stated that if you eat a gluten-free diet, it can help extend the honeymoon. Also, if you don't eat a ton of carbohydrates to overwhelm your pancreas, you can make the honeymoon last longer, like meaning that you're not eating like 200 carbs a meal, like don't do that. Or you're gonna probably overwhelm the pancreas, whatever's left of your beta cells in your pancreas for insulin secretion. Like they're gonna be so overwhelmed that they're just gonna like get all toxic. It's gonna get all toxic in your bloodstream again, and then they're just gonna like be destroyed quicker. But then again, because the honeymoon phase is basically also where it's the time period where your immune system is finishing off the rest of your beta cells that haven't been destroyed yet. So, like I had said, 80 to 90% are destroyed. So I'm just gonna, just be an example, like for me, I'm just gonna say that 90% of mine were destroyed at diagnosis. That means I have 10% that are alive, correct? Well, for me, it took my immune system 8 weeks, or approximately 2 months, for them to finish off the last 10% of the cells to destroy the last 10% of the cells of my pancreas that secrete insulin. They do also say, too, that once you're past the main honeymoon, you really only have a honeymoon right after you're diagnosed. There really is no honeymoon, like, 5 years after you're diagnosed. It's, like, pretty much happens within probably immediately, or within 3 to 6 months after you're diagnosed, you'll go through a honeymoon. But they do say sometimes even people who have had diabetes for years and years and years, they do say if people do experience low blood sugars and they can't really figure out why, they do say sometimes the beta cells will regenerate, or try to regenerate, but then all of a sudden, you might get that help for a little bit for a day and you don't realize it, but then all of a sudden your immune system goes, oh, we gotta kill you, you're bad, even though you're really not bad, and just zaps them out and kills them again, and then you're stuck. So they say some days where you're running a little bit low, and you can't really figure out why, you really didn't do a lot of activity, or you didn't take too much insulin than you normally would for a particular meal or time period of whatever you're dealing with. They do say that sometimes you get, like, they call it the perpetual honeymoon. Like, we might all be in a state of perpetual honeymoon, if that makes sense. So, but they don't know for sure, but basically, once you're past your honeymoon, you basically can really no longer rely on your pancreas to help control your blood sugar as a type 1 diabetic. So therefore, in order for you to maintain good blood glucose control, you have to rely on external insulin and reasonable doses at that point. They do say if you are going through the honeymoon and you are talking to your doctor, they whatever they say at least stay on some sort of external insulin, because apparently that keeps, again, it keeps the blood and the body less toxic for the beta cells with all the blood sugars and stuff, so that if you're on that a little bit of external insulin, you could prolong it. But again, it's all research. This is still a very vague and taboo topic of type 1 diabetes, but I figured I'd kind of explain it a little better, what it is, kind of what happened, and a little bit of personal experience with me. But again, I want to do a really in-depth video on it, just to really just show what it's about, because again, when I was going through this, mine just ended not too long ago. Mine ended about 4 weeks ago, because again, I'm newly diagnosed. So I wish there were more helpful videos, people explaining their personal experiences and what they kind of went through, and maybe what to kind of expect. Again, what I'm going to tell you in a future video doesn't mean you're exactly going to go through those same things, but in general, you might go through similar features, characteristics that you can kind of symptomatize based upon your symptoms and your blood sugar, how it is balanced and monitored. You'll be able to tell when you're going out. During this honeymoon phase, it is important to stay in close contact with your endocrinology or doctors that help manage your diabetes, because they need to be on top of it. Because if they put you on minimal doses and all of a sudden those minimal doses aren't working anymore and your blood sugars are going to the moon, you better get on some higher doses of insulin or you're going to feel like crap. Again, I will talk more about my personal experience and kind of what happened with me, but until then, I hope this helps you kind of understand this kind of vague and not really well understood topic about type 1 diabetes. So, until tomorrow's video, I hope you are having a good day. I will see you tomorrow with day number 8 of diabetes awareness. Take care, God bless, and see you in my next video. Subscribe if you like these kind of videos and you want to continue on this journey with me. I hope to do more than just diabetes videos, but for this month you're just going to get all diabetes, and I hope to do more in-depth diabetes videos looking more specifically on different aspects of diabetes management and control. So, bye everybody!